Greetings, friends, Romans, and patrons. I'm your host, literally and figuratively, Joe Straczynski, here to do the first of a triple thread of commentaries on our big Messages from Earth, Severed Dreams, Point of No Return trilogy. Before we get to that, a brief update for those who've been inquiring about what happened with the shoulder. I mentioned before that the labrum was torn and we're looking at either physical therapy or surgery. Those options got narrowed down a little bit by virtue of the fact that as they were doing this last MRI with contrast, they discovered what they had not seen before, which I'm not quite sure why no one saw it before, but no one saw it before, that there is a fracture in the ball of the arm that goes into the shoulder socket. I believe it's called a Hill-Sachs lesion or fracture. So we're probably going to have to do both of those at the same time and looking more and more like surgery. So it is what it is. I once saw something that wasn't what it was, and it scared the hell out of me. Word to the wise. Thus, we proceed now into our first commentary of these three. What I will do is I will get it going, because there's a lot to say about the background of this that probably should be considered part of the commentary itself. So I'm just going to set it going, and we will begin chatting about this. So for all those at home, we do the countdown. 3, 2, 1, and press. So it comes down to the math. Sometimes storytelling is math. And, oh, by the way, there were questions about the eggs on this station. And look, if you aren't going to be chickens, and bringing eggs up before they spoil is going to be very difficult. But I love that we still have the process of playing pranks on Ivana at breakfast. That's when she's at her least humorous. Back to the math. I knew that this was going to be a story that, overall, the 5-year arc, different than what had been done before. And I knew that at some point, we had to flip. It has to go from what we think it is to what it becomes. And the math said, okay, 5-year arc, the halfway point is somewhere in the middle of season 3. So up until now, it's been a process of slowly, gradually tightening the screws on the characters, the Earth Alliance issues, the Shadow War, and all of that. Because when this show was made, back when dinosaurs ruled the Earth, the idea of the problems with Earth and the Shadow War, that sort of thing, usually tended to be either resolved, often a cliffhanger, then you pick it up the next year, or it's gone, and you resolve it, or it just stays bubbling in the background for your characters ad infinitum. Halfway through Buffy, she didn't beat all the vampires, then open up a shot selling, hand-knitted nose warmers. It didn't change to her looking for other kinds of things. It was always that vampire threat. So I knew I was going to change how this worked, and audiences were not going to be expecting that. They assumed that those problems would be just bubbling in the background for all 5 years, and maybe at the end of the show we'd resolve them in some way or other, but that was about it. Nobody saw coming that there was going to be a complete change in the course and the nature of the show and the characters. I knew that these 3 episodes were where I was going to get it done. I had to warn production that these were coming because these 3 episodes are ridiculously CGI heavy. I think in the second episode, Point of No Return, there's like 4 pages that have something on the order of like 100 effect shots, or that Severed Dreams. One of those 2 had literally 100 shots in 4 pages. So therefore, we kept the first bunch of episodes around it CGI light. I wrote some that were going to be just more or less character stories, a little bit of CG, to give time for our computer image people to get this done, because they're just 3 heinous episodes. And of course, no one was going to be looking for a big sea change in the middle of a season. We'd already sort of started to point to the fact that we don't do things normally. And I think in these days, in the average binge-watching show, you would see these 3 episodes at the end of a season and the first part of the next season. We dropped them dead in the center when nobody was looking, when the prior episodes had been relatively quiet, all things considered. We were setting it up, Sheridan asking about is the package on the way, that sort of thing. But I wanted no one to see it coming. Hence, even the title being fairly innocuous, Messages from Earth. Whenever I'm going to do something big and scary, I always give it the very innocuous title to, again, lull the audience into a sense of, letting their guard down. And thus came these 3 episodes, which I still remember to this day when they first aired, people were just knocked back because they didn't see it coming, which is exactly right. On the flip side, everything there you needed to see it coming was there. All the details, all the background work. No one had ever really done this kind of thing before, so it was important to figure out on the way. And I like the fact that, we dropped this in the middle of the season, and after this was all done, there was an assumption, okay, well, at least we're done now until the end of the season. Like 4 episodes later, we had The War Without End, 2-parter, which again, it freaked everyone out. Stop hitting us in the middle of the show. Give us some time to breathe. I wanted to use a lot of narration in this because, in terms of the beginning, we're used to getting bad news on the television. We're used to seeing this kind of information released inch by inch and seeing people react to it silently. And their silence adds to the weight of the moment, as did the sequence bringing Dr. Mary Kirkish in to see our team. I wanted us to start out feeling like something really, really significant is about to happen. And this is the episode where that really comes to fruition. In my office, at the B5 stages, there was a large card, I will show you next episode, a quote from Franz Kafka, which led to the title of the second episode. He said, "The point of no return, that is the point that must be reached," in writing, basically. And that, to me, was what this show was for me and for the characters. The point of no return. Everything here changes. Very often, political leaders find themselves incarcerated for rather long periods of time, looking at Nelson Mandela, before they're allowed out to change the world and make it a better place. So I wanted to put Jakar under arms and under guard and in his cell as much as humanly possible. Here, later on Centauri Prime with Cartagia, he's right. Sitting in the dark cell, all you really have is time to think. And he's come through a lot recently, particularly between the Dust to Dust story and others. And now his character, his personality, is also kind of reaching a point of no return. Andreas is just so phenomenal in this sequence. There, you see in his face almost a weird kind of joy, a sense of peace and a sense of tranquility and an equanimity of spirit that if you had said to the audience in season 1, or even after the pilot, that's where he's going to go, they wouldn't have accepted it. But now, having gone on that journey with him, we kind of do. You forget that they're prosthetics after a while. They're so beautifully applied by optic nerve, and he works through them so well. I may have mentioned before, but he loved the mask. He used to refer to it as the early Greek theater, where they tended to wear masks connoting gods or different characters. So good. Yeah, the package has arrived. We set that up earlier. And Jakar passing in out of shadow, that's our director at his best. He was Always so skilled with these things. I always thought that Narn was written right to left, so I said, well, let's flop the shot. A few people noticed that, but he had a hard time doing it on the day, so we figured flop the shot. Whenever you go again to slow motion and to narration over it, you begin to set up something important happening. For me, directors like John Frankenheimer and others were good at creating moments of importance through just silence or one person speaking, and then these kinds of long lingering shots. Again, just saying to the audience, trouble's coming. The cast, when they got this script, went out of their minds. I think the three scripts came out pretty close to each other because we had to have them done pretty fast together to begin doing the CGI work. And they could not believe the turn the story was taking suddenly. And the fact that she hesitates to even talk about this is another way of saying that this is important, and if she gets caught talking about this there, she's going to die. But talk she does. Now we begin to get the other side of the Icarus story. This is, again, for me, the hard part as a writer was taking all these disparate threads we had throughout the first 2.25 seasons and now pulling them together. And we saw Icarus, we saw the other side of it, now we're hearing more about it. We've talked about the problems on Mars for a while now. Where this part of the scene comes from, by the way, when I was a kid, I had this horrific nightmare. I dreamed I was in a basement looking up a flight of stairs at a storm door, kind of opens up like this, and that the door opened up and I was looking up into the night, and there are people running back and forth, and I see a fleet of like UFOs or strange objects going through the sky. And that image, to this day, if I think of it, gives me the willies. There's something about the perspective being in a small enclosed space, looking at something impossible or dangerous. And somehow that weirdly makes it more real. When you have one person's confined perspective of something grand happening. So we have Yolando on the sand looking up at the shadow vessels coming to Centauri Prime. It's hooking it to that point of view, the look up at the sky. And that informs the scene where she is talking about seeing this thing going over the bunker. It kind of informs the shot later on in the show when Leda is on Mars and his wife Star goes right over her. There's something about connecting those that makes everything seem more real and more creepy at the same time. One of the hardest things to do as an actor is to go in and deliver a truckload of exposition so it won't feel like exposition. Some guest casts could do it better than others. She's carrying the bulk of the last act and this act on her shoulders. But she delivers it magnificently. You buy everything she is saying. You believe what's going on, and it provides the opportunity again to flash back and forth. It's always dangerous to have a character talking about things that happened in the past because it can pull you out of the moment. And we're always advised to sort of be careful not to overdo it. I tend to overdo everything. So I was also told never to have two actors in a scene for more than 3 pages because, again, the audience will lose interest. But then turned around and wrote, comes the Inquisitor and intersections in real time. So what do I know? Here's the scene that is right out of Nightmare for me. Same position, looking up, And as it comes overhead, something about that, this is a shot they always gives fans to Willie's too. When it comes right overhead and the shadow falls on her, it just, there's so much CG in these 3 episodes, it's kind of terrifying. A lot of it was stuff we had never tried before. I like the sense that we don't see this thing actually happen. We see the firing downward, but we don't see it connecting with the other ship at this time. In a weird sort of way, seeing the ship overhead doing what it's doing helps illustrate that it's sentient. It has a purpose to what it's doing and a design to what it's doing. And I think that what you don't see is much more terrifying, more interesting than what you do. And when it does come out, like, oh my gosh. I'm a big believer in Stephen King's theory about the door. While something is scratching at the door, it can be anything. Terrifying, your brain goes all kinds of places. When you open up the door and it's a 10-foot cockroach, your brain thinks, well, it could have been worse, it could have been a 14-foot cockroach. The moment you demystify it, it loses the power. So whenever possible, I try to sort of keep the door at least partially closed and let the audience's mind go to where it needs to go. This part here where it talks about Michael Garibaldi having seen part of this on Mars, this tied in with the comic book we were doing at that time. And I kind of wanted to create this unified field theory of storytelling where things would come out either in book form or magazine form or comic book form close to when they would happen in the show. So you could see it from different perspectives all at the same time. This is an ongoing theme of the show of those who should not be messing with ancient alien technology, messing with ancient alien technology. The arrogance of that, the belief that we can control whatever we want to control, that yes, this thing is advanced, but we can handle it. Oddly enough, the second hardest thing in a big exposition scene is for other characters to look engaged, because they have to react to what she's saying without actually saying anything. They have to be present and not let themselves be distracted or pulled away. Staying in the moment is really hard. And the characters are all hit in exactly the way that they should be hit. Franklin saying this is too big for this. Michael Caine had this very same problem as a beginning actor. And he was in a scene in a play where he didn't have any dialogue. And the director pulled him aside and said, what are you doing? You're not doing anything. Said, well, I don't have any lines. I don't have anything to say. And the director said, no, you got this completely wrong. In your head are the most amazing, funniest, sardonic, intelligent, witty comments that the world has ever seen. You're just choosing not to say them. And that's the point that you have to get as an actor is you have no lines here, and Lanier has like almost no lines, and others are very limited, but they have things that they could be saying, and that's what you have to see in their eyes while they're acting. The Night Watch thread is something else that's been sort of building quietly in the background, getting more and more sinister, because that's how authoritarian dictators come into power. They begin a very incremental process by which they sort of get you to the small things first and the bigger things, then you're stuck. You've gone too far, you can't pull back. This was a really kind of crucial moment for the character when he takes off that Earth Alliance symbol. We have shown Sheridan from day one being absolutely loyal to Earth Force. He is a soldier. He's been trained to be a soldier. And now for the first time, he has to not just take off the badge for purposes of identification so that no one will know where he came from. It's also a symbol of him stepping back from the very thing that he has used to identify himself all this time. It's how he defined himself. If you were really to have the Inquisitor come at him, who are you? He would first say, I would say, I'm a soldier. I'm an Earth Force soldier. And now I begin to see our characters have kind of been reacting a lot over the course of the show. Now we are moving them toward a more active role, and we see the weight of that. This is honestly one of Bruce's best performances. Only second only to Severed Dreams in many respects. He really conveys the weight of this, and I don't want to keep harping on that point. But because this is going to be such a major shift, I needed the audience to be on board with you from the first frame, that you're about to go on a ride that you had not anticipated. And so when he says, it won't be captured one way or the other, we know what that means. Either he will come back or he won't come back. And again, going back once more to, we have the structure of dialogue over scenes, because again, that somehow always, to my mind, heightens the drama of it. We connect the outside with the lights going over her, saying things that might be his last things to say. It's one of the few times when we really go far from Babylon 5 too, and up until now most of the show has been set on the station. We really haven't done a whole lot elsewhere. Bits and pieces of Earth, mostly on monitors, but we really haven't gone further afield than that. Over the course of the show we begin to open that up. Centauri Prime, obviously, the Narn homeworld, because they're integral to that. But going per episode to places, and we see the Drazi homeworld later episodes and more of Mars. I kind of by now knew what the limitations were of the CG, also what we could do. So I resolved to just, now that I knew what I could pull off, push it to the maximum. The poor CG guys were just overwhelmed with these 3 episodes. But fortunately, as I mentioned before, we kept it light on both sides and they could more or less do it. The directing here is so lovely because it really, again, builds the moment, builds the silences. I always thought that if you want to hold someone's attention, don't talk. Take a moment to find your thoughts. If the other person is going to jump onto you and you want to have weight in the conversation, just give it a moment. Think about what you're going to say. The silence is what brings the authority. I'm a big fan of Harold Pinter. If you have not read or seen any plays by Harold Pinter, I highly commend them to you. Harold Pinter was known as sort of being the master of the silent moment, where the silence would often become so excruciating and so powerful and so painful that it overwhelmed whatever the characters were going to say. And coming back again from a stage background, I knew Pinter's work, and I always thought, okay, let's, as much as possible, use that, and also his indirection too. Very often, Pinter had 2 characters in a room arguing about something. But what they were arguing about wasn't really the problem. The problem was in the back of their heads, informing that argument. So they were talking about one thing, but they were communicating about something else. And that's one of the hardest things to pull off as a writer, and which is why I'm so fond of his work. And again, commended to you as a masterclass in how to create moments without being obvious about it. And here again we have, as I mentioned before, the escalation from small things to bigger things to bigger things, to now suddenly we're looking at people being arrested because of their email, because of their correspondence, because of their who they associate with. It's how the Nazis did it. It's how cults do it. Hand me that pencil. Easily done. Do another small favor. A little bit more. A little more, a little more, a little more. And then you have no road back. Because if you go back, then you are admitting that all the things you did before were wrong. And it's really hard for people to do that. I love the fact that now this night watch situation is closing in now on the captain. So we have all kinds of nets starting to close in around him. He got that 4 o'clock shot awfully fast. This was coming up on one of my favorite scenes to write. And again, it's trying to ground the story. You could just cut to them arriving, but you want to see him not sleeping. You want to see him in the driver's seat of the car trying to keep awake even though he's falling asleep at the wheel, trying to get to Disneyland before he falls asleep. And putting him out of uniform gave him a more relaxed silhouette and more relaxed performance. It feels more grounded. It feels like just this guy caught in really overwhelming circumstances. It shows you how much wardrobe can make a difference. I'm not sure this scene would play as well if he was in full uniform. So where this comes from, the Minbari beds. I'm a huge Shakespeare fan, and I heard upon Avon a number of years ago, and went to a tour of what they said was, Shakespeare's home, and the beds were just teeny tiny, and there were all these pillows at one end, rising up. And I asked, they were all looking at everything else, so why is the bed so short? Why are those pillows so high up? And the guide explained that at this time when Shakespeare was around, there was, as the lens says, a fear that if they were horizontal, they were tempting death because people who were dead were kind of like this, except when, in the George Romero movie, then they get up and they come after you. So they were basically sleeping in Minbari beds. So at the time, I need to use this somewhere. And that's the fun thing about being a writer in science fiction, is that very often the Earth stuff, the human stuff, is the most alien if you do it right. Lado talks about the Centauri guard over a rose or a flower, the first flower of spring, and told to guard it, and they never rescinded the order, so he's doing it now for 100 years later. That also comes from a true story about, allegedly true, about one of the Tsarinas in Russia, who gave the order, saw the rose coming out through the snow, and told the imperial guard to stand over it, to stand guard, and 20 years later, they were still doing it, but she had never rescinded the order to stand there and stay on guard. For me, it's always also the small, tiny moments that make characters. It's easy to get lost in the big battles and the big political stuff and the big stakes. But him talking about being young and not being able to sleep because he needed the rain, is something that we can all relate to. We all know how restful the sound of rain is. And to divert for a second from all this terribly big stuff that's brought us all this far, and talk about this one personal moment, and look at the takes. We aren't cutting away much in terms of large shots. It's small and it's intimate. And I said to the director, I want the sense that they're in bed together. And by going really close, we kind of create that illusion in a sense. It's a very personal moment, but also a very romantic moment. The personal is what underlines and makes drama work. It really is. I don't care how big your effects are if they aren't relating to each other in small, important ways. You got nothing. And she brings the rain. And I think if there was a moment when he really fell in love with her, this would have been it. It's such a sweet little moment, and the holding of the hands. A simple gesture, but at this moment very powerful. I always loved having Marcus be the one to sort of try and bug Ivanova into loosening up a little bit, because my tendency to get wound up in my own work, I've sort of brought into Ivanova, and it's kind of the exact opposite of what we just saw, where we have two characters who were relaxed enough to have this kind of conversation, and she has her own demons to fight. She not just is she caught up with the work, but also in trying to define herself. Again, Sheridan defined himself by his work. Ivanova defines herself by her work. And when you do that, I'm a writer. I define myself. Writing isn't just what I do, it's what I am. If God appeared tomorrow, what I don't believe in, but said, you can't write anymore, there would be a puff of purple smoke and I would disappear, like Warner Brothers cartoon. Beep, and gone. And people who are career whatever, career military, career doctors, career what have you, you take that away from them, or you threaten to take it away from them, that the very means of their identification as human beings. And it's hard. And we, seeing that in her, we understand that war, if you will. Yeah, going into Ganymede, going into Jupiter, this was really pushing it for our FX people. They really had to get into this. This, of course, information about individual people becoming the operational cores of shadow vessels is something we will explore a lot during the course of the show. There's also an operational metaphor that those who want power exploit those who can't get out of the way, that wars happen, but it's always individuals who are trapped in the middle who get hurt the most, used as cannon fodder. Again, going back to what I said before about the narration, I wanted you to not see what they were talking about, just hearing about it. And then you can have it coming out. So again, that's the process. You have the door, keep it closed for the first part of the dialogue, and you open the door enough to see on the other side. So half the scene is voiceover, half the scene is this part where it comes out. I remember seeing this for the first time. There's a CGI version of Dailies where they send you the shots, and the first time I saw the shot by itself, I just was like, okay, we can pull this off. Like I can relax a little bit. We did this once where the shares come together, but never again. I'm not sure why. And again, you go with the implication of things. It's not just that this is a really big, powerful ship. It's that it's also insane. That notion of something that powerful being that insane, again, makes it feel bigger. It's not just some faceless enemy. It's the ship itself is insane. And this is like one of the first times they took one of these things on, straight on, in a fair fight. There's a notion that, you have the hero and the bad guy, and the bad guy's always going to be flawed and easily beaten. I think that the stronger the enemy, and you can defeat it without cheating, you can outthink it, or you can find some way to beat it that shows the resourcefulness of your main character. That's a lot more interesting than having a character who is your villain, who is designed to be defeated. I've seen so many opportunities where, or so many shows, I should say, where the movie or TV show can only work if everyone is stupid. For me, I like to go with the idea that everyone is smart, which is why you see very few characters in my stories who aren't up to the pressures I put on them, as they're getting pressures put on the ship right now. Delenn is a brilliant character. Sheridan's a brilliant character. Ivanova is a brilliant character. Franklin's a brilliant character, and but then so are the forces that they're opposing. So then one has to sort of dig in to figure it out. I guess it's the first time anyone ever showed actual combat taking place within Jupiter. Shaky cam, but I think here it's more than justified. In a way, it becomes a submarine movie at this point, where the submarine has to dive deep. They're trying to avoid the bombs coming down at it, the depth charges. That's if I hold anything back, I would tell you. It's his way of saying basically, fuck you. The way that the shadow vessel comes apart, it looks like a spider after you've stepped on it. It kind of goes like, eh. And I love that. And we'll let the audience be like, oh, good, we're safe. It's like in every horror movie ever made, there's always one person who says, well, we're safe now, and then gets eaten. So we want to let the audience think for one moment, everything's going to be okay, then all hell breaks loose. I will confess, I probably should have not made it the Agamemnon. I mean, yeah, it does make the emotions more poignant that it's his own ship trying to come after him. But by the same token, it's almost too convenient. I can feel the hand of the author in this sequence. If I had to do over, I might make it something else. But the issue isn't necessarily firing at his own ship. All Earth ships are his own ship. They're all on the same side. So the dynamic should be the same. Someone said that the process of writing is putting your character up a tree and then you start throwing rocks at them. That's what this show soon becomes. Is every single time we get a chance, I put the characters up a tree and throw rocks at them. And here again we have she's right. There's surrender or fight, and for the audience as well. Then there's all they can see is that binary choice. So once again, Sheridan has to be smarter than the situation he's in to find as well as having Delenn also come up with the idea of igniting the jump point inside the atmosphere. They're kind of like two pieces of the same thought, these two. So she comes up with the original idea, and he comes up with the refinement of it to go to the edge of the atmosphere. Again, the characters being smarter than the bad guys. But the bad guys are also pretty smart. I love the screen on the White Star. It really worked very well. Again, so hard to render. You look at 3 different levels there. You got the CG through the window, the live action windows we're looking through, then the screen coming down onto it. So much layering going on here. Both guys in front are both of the weapons people are laughing. You don't see Minbari laugh a whole lot. They're not known, particularly the full-on Minbari, not known as they're having a sense of humor. Also, it's very hard to, as an actor, to celebrate the moment while feeling campy about it. Like, boy, we got them. Coming up now on the last part of it. So the audience doesn't know that there's 2 more episodes coming that are going to basically blow them back up against a wall. So I capitalize on that. Yes, we see that there's been incident involving the Agamemnon, destruction, blaming this intruding vessel. But then we start seeing it being reported differently. And we start the process of winding it up even further. We think, okay, this is over, it's done with. But in point of fact, as we saw earlier, Night Watch is watching. Not at night, it's during the day, somewhere. So we start to set up the possibility that Sheridan and the rest of them are literally in danger of being arrested. Yeah, I think Air Force being infiltrated by traitors. That goes back to the House of American Activities Committee, which said that various members of the military or the entertainment industry that have been infiltrated by communists. They always use the fear of the other to try and get their way. So now we start wrapping the threads of imminent arrest around Sheridan and the rest of them. And we put Zach in the position of saying, what the hell is he going to do? Zach is kind of our everyman. He is someone who didn't really aspire to be in the middle of things. He just wanted a good job, good paycheck, to have some responsibility. Watching him agonize through this process is, well, first off, it's really good character stuff, but Jeff did such a remarkably good job on these scenes. You feel him really being caught between what they're asking him to do and what he knows he should and should not do. Jeff was so solid in these kinds of scenes. He really was. Looking at the badge is a little bit over the top, but we wanted to make a point. This the chart. I kind of wanted something a little bit more specific, where you actually will be able to see the lines of where they go, but it looked like it looked like a 5th grade art project. Is what it looked like. I think it was kind of done at the last minute, so we didn't show you much of it. And again, the relationship with them is so good that I know that Claudia wasn't sure if she actually would like someone like Marcus. He's kind of geeky and weird, but on camera they had this great relationship, and off camera they were also were good friends. But as a relationship aspect, she wasn't ever sure that Ivana would go for someone like Marcus. And now we set the hook. The declaration of martial law. Again, coming through the news sources. We began with news sources. We're ending with news sources. This is the first sign that things are going to change in a big way. And those things change heavily going into the point of no return. When this first was finished, I saw it all complete. I just thought, this is our show at its best. This is us firing on all cylinders. The next two just take that and bring it to a whole different level, leaving the entire show completely turned upside down. which is the fun. That's the fun of being a writer, is turning this upside down. So there we are. That was Messages from Earth. I hope you enjoyed the commentary, and we'll see you very soon for part 2, Point of No Return. Stay out of trouble.